Families clinging to hope waited here for weeks. They waited for news of the 78 people still lost inside the ruins of the State Audit Office building in Bangkok. A husband who would never meet his unborn child. A son who had promised to come home. A daughter who was just starting her first job. Her father stood at the site for 13 nights, waiting for news about his daughter. It was her first job in Bangkok. The building collapsed on her first day. In the end, 96 people would never return home. The search for survivors ended, but a new search began. A search for the truth. How could a modern skyscraper, miles from an earthquake's epicenter, be the only building in all of Bangkok to suffer such a catastrophic collapse? On June 30th, the government delivered its verdict. The Prime Minister announced that the tragedy was not caused by faulty materials. She said,
"We've clearly stated that the root cause was in the design and construction. As for who is at fault, that is for the police and DSI to determine. The materials themselves were not the issue. But in this particular project, the steel was cut down in size and used in a way that did not comply with regulations, making it effectively illegal." She added that substandard concrete and faulty construction practices were also to blame.
In other words, she stated that the steel met the required standards. The cause, she declared, was rooted in serious design flaws and construction negligence. A closed case. But is it the truth? If the steel was sound, why did Thailand's own industry minister, Akonot Prompham, announce on April 23rd that steel from the collapsed tower had failed safety tests for a second time? Why did he state unequivocally, "A fail is a fail, a pass is a pass," and forward those damning results to the Department of Special Investigation? Why is the Federation of Thai Industries raising a national alarm that over half the rebar market in Thailand is now dominated by this same type of substandard induction furnace steel, warning it could compromise buildings across the country? And if this was simply a case of design negligence, why did the construction company responsible offer a mere 50,000 baht, less than $1,400 in compensation for each life lost? An offer so insulting, the Lawyers' Council of Thailand is now preparing its own legal action. The official story asks us to believe one thing. The evidence screams another. A story of repeated test failures, of national safety warnings, and of a political narrative that simply does not add up. So what really happened inside that doomed structure? And who is truly being held responsible? Let's break down the findings that the official investigation wants you to forget. On March 31st, Thailand's Ministry of Industry released test results showing that steel bars collected from the collapsed State Audit Office building failed multiple national standards. Lead investigator Titipas Chodachachinan confirmed the steel failed tests for mass, chemical composition, and stress endurance. The bars bore the brand Sky, produced by Shin Keyuan Steel Co., Limited, a company registered in 2011 with 80% Chinese ownership. Critically, the steel originated from a factory in Rayong Province, which had been shut down by Thai authorities in December 2024 due to substandard steel production. At that time, officials seized over 200,400 tons of steel from the premises. "We can prosecute any manufacturer and seller of substandard products," Titipas told reporters. "We will also inspect the factory to ensure it has not violated the shutdown order." Photos circulating online show concrete slabs and rebar separating entirely, with no bonding visible between steel and cement. In proper construction, steel bars are meant to integrate with the concrete to resist structural pressure. But in this case, the rebar looked almost loose, suggesting low-grade cement, improper reinforcement placement, or rushed curing. In the words of one analyst, the main column on the first floor fractured as if it had been overloaded by gravity. The collapse had no resilience. The steel used was DB32 and SD50 grade, which according to Thai regulations is inappropriate for high-rise buildings. These types are known to have hard outer layers and soft interiors, making them prone to cracking under stress, especially in seismic events. Further investigation revealed that the steel bars had been rapidly cooled, a process that may increase brittleness. Bars were marked with T symbols, indicating they had undergone quenching, which can result in inconsistent strength and premature failure. The evidence suggests that substandard materials were not just present, they may have been central to the collapse. On April 23rd, the case against the steel used in the collapsed State Audit Office building deepened. Thailand's industry minister, Akanat Promphane, took the microphone in a tense press briefing. In his hand were the latest results from the Iron and Steel Institute of Thailand. The findings were damning. Steel bars taken directly from the wreckage, specifically the SD40T 20mm variety, had failed industry standards. Again, Minister Akanat didn't mince words. The Chinese company's SD40T 20mm steel bar failed the mass per metro test, consistent with the previous results, he said, referring to Shin Keyuan Steel Limited, the manufacturer. A fail is a fail, a pass is a pass. The test results were forwarded to the Department of Special Investigation as part of the ongoing probe into the SAO building collapse. Akanat emphasized that the testing procedures followed standards set by the Thai Industrial Standards Institute. This was the second time steel from the same company had failed. And yet, the Prime Minister had already told the nation the materials were not to blame. But the story didn't end there. Less than a month later, disaster struck again. And this time, there could be no talk of earthquakes, no convenient scapegoats for why a building fell. On May 16th, just 2 weeks before the government was scheduled to release its official report on the SAO collapse, a factory building in the Amata City Chonburi Industrial Estate, located in Phan Thom District, crumbled to the ground. Nearby cars were crushed. One person was injured. Minister Akanat broke the news on his own Facebook page. The factory had been leased since 2022 by Cosmo Manufacturing Thailand Limited. The rubble was still settling when his investigators moved in. What they found eliminated all doubt. Steel rods, 20mm deformed bars, and 9mm rounds scattered across the wreckage. And on those bars, the same branding. Shin Keyuan Steel. 2 buildings, 2 collapses, same brand. Same steel. This was a pattern. Akanat confirmed it personally. Deformed steel bars and round steel rods manufactured by Shin Keyuan Steel were found in the rubble. The spotlight turned again to Shin Keyuan Steel, one of 12 steel producers in Thailand that use induction furnace technology. Unlike electric arc furnaces, EAF, the international standard for producing high-strength structural steel, IF systems are notorious for their inability to eliminate harmful impurities like boron, sulfur, and phosphorus. China itself banned the use of induction furnace for construction rebar in 2017, but not before some induction furnace producers, shut down at home, relocated to ASEAN countries, including Thailand. The Federation of Thai Industries, FTI, issued a nationwide safety warning. IF steel, they reported, now makes up 55% of Thailand's rebar market, a staggering 1.6 million tons annually. And that, they warned, is putting lives at risk. Vikram Wacharakub, a senior FTI advisor with over 50 years in the steel industry, stated, "Induction furnace is suitable for precision casting and non-ferrous metals, not for structural steel. It cannot consistently remove impurities. The risk of structural failure in a disaster is too high." According to the FTI, the problem isn't just isolated test failures, it's systemic. Consider these recent findings. Over 7,000 tons of IF steel were seized after testing revealed dangerously high boron levels and low tensile strength. Some batches were found contaminated with electronic waste. In Phuket, rebar snapped during basic bending tests, failing safety standards outright. EAF was the only approved method. And while the government continues to argue that materials weren't the root cause of the March collapse, public trust is eroding fast. If the steel was not to blame, why does it keep failing tests? Why does it keep turning up in rubble? And why is it that the families of 96 dead were offered just 50,000 baht, less than $1,400 USD per life, as compensation? Even Thailand's Lawyers' Council has intervened. calling the offer a national insult and preparing legal action. The Thai government insists that the building collapse was the result of human error, that its design was flawed, that the contractors failed, that the regulations were ignored, that the steel was legally compliant but misused. So did the building's design really contribute to its own destruction? On April 18th, Deputy Prime Minister and Interior Minister Anutin Charnvirakul addressed the public, stating that an official government panel under his leadership had found that the SAO building was asymmetrical in design. This flaw, he explained, likely made the structure vulnerable to the lateral forces generated by the March 28 earthquake. Anutin said, "If a building is asymmetrical, it can be twisted when swayed by strong winds or earthquakes. Engineers must know how to increase the strength of an asymmetrical building to keep it in balance and help it withstand the forces," he added. "The panel needs to undertake thorough calculations to get rid of room for doubts and boost confidence in the findings. Engineering principles are scientific. They don't allow room for discretion." In other words, the geometry of the building may have been its fatal flaw. The panel's conclusions echoed those of one of Thailand's most respected engineering minds, Professor Emeritus Dr. Warsak Kanok Nukulchai. He is the former president of the Asian Institute of Technology, a fellow of the Royal Society of Thailand, and a structural engineering expert. In a 28-minute video published on April 14th, Dr. Warsak explains that when the earthquake hit, the building's asymmetry caused it to be twisted while it was being swayed. This twisting force, or torsion, is always most critical at the point where the building is held rigid, its base. This is where the restrained warping occurs. Imagine holding a ruler at one end and twisting it. All the stress concentrates in your hand. For the SAO building, the ground was that hand. The cyclic, back-and-forth twisting motion of the earthquake relentlessly attacked the shear walls and supportive columns at the ground floor. In his analysis, Dr. Warsak mentions two types of full building collapse. 1. Ground fall failure, where foundational structural supports, especially interconnected shear walls and vertical columns, are destroyed first, causing the entire building to lose its base and collapse downward with accelerating force. 2. Floor progressive collapse, where upper floors collapse in sequence due to structural failures above. He states that the SAO building collapsed due to the first type, ground fall failure, within just 8 seconds of the earthquake's impact. He said,
Let's understand the SAO building structure. It's a 30-story reinforced concrete high-rise, consisting of 1. Columns, for vertical loads. 2. Shear core or elevator walls, to resist wind and earthquakes. 3. Post-notionalized flat slabs, for floors. The shear cores weren't centered. They were near the building's edge, displacing the center of torsion from the geometric center, causing twisting when the building swayed. Imagine a building with 4 corner columns and an off-center shear core. The center of rotation doesn't align with the building center. When the building sways, it also twists, not just rocks back and forth. The left-hand clips in this slide show a symmetric building that only sways, while the right-hand one shows a twisting building due to off-center cores. This torsion causes increased stress on walls and columns. Placing shear cores off-center isn't wrong by itself. Many buildings do so due to architectural needs, but structural engineers must design the building to resist alternating torsional forces without failure. According to continuum mechanics, twisting a material back and forth generates shear stress, distorting flat cross-sections and creating warping, especially at the base where the core anchors to the foundation. Lab studies show that repeated torsion of reinforced concrete elements causes diagonal 45 degrees, weakening and ultimately disintegrating the concrete into powder. This likely happened to the elevator shaft walls during the earthquake-induced swaying and twisting. The walls failed first, followed by the columns that bore the redistributed loads, all within split seconds, leaving the building unsupported and causing a total freefall collapse. This gravity-driven collapse left no time for tilting. It dropped straight down in 8 seconds.
At the 2-second mark, the top of the building's shear core begins to move. To the untrained eye, it looks like the failure is starting at the top, but Dr. Warsak explains this is a fatal illusion. That movement at the top is only possible because, by that point, the shear walls at the ground floor had already been destroyed. The top of the building was moving because its foundation was gone. By the fifth second, with the shear core obliterated, all the building's massive weight was transferred to the supportive columns. Lacking the strength of the core, they too failed instantly. With its foundation completely erased, the entire 30-story structure was, for a moment, hanging in the air before gravity took over. By the 8th second, it fell vertically, almost in a free fall, pulled down by the simple, brutal equation of physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. The immense potential energy stored in its height was released in an instant, crashing down with a destructive power that left nothing but a stack of concrete pancakes. And that's why virtually none of the building's core shear walls remained standing. The collapse was vertical, violent, and absolute. The structural supports were literally torn apart by restrained warping, what engineers call cyclic torsion. This twisting motion, combined with gravitational force, shattered the building from the base upward. Dr. Wersak concluded. It left almost none of the structures to stand, due to its great loads that fell fast and crashed hard, except for a stack of concrete pancakes. And this is the reason why we can hardly see any parts of the sheer core of the building left at the scene, while the concrete slabs are so brittle. This is a destructive power of potential energy that was accumulated for a long period before being suddenly released, in just 8 seconds. The professor addressed this type of collapse as tragic, as it hardly leaves any room for those trapped in a collapsed building to survive. But were these design irregularities avoidable? And did the builders follow the law? A representative from the Council of Engineers Thailand, CEE, told Parliament's Budget Committee that the SAO building did not comply with the 2007 ministerial regulation under the Building Code Act, BE 2022, legislation introduced after the 2004 tsunami to ensure earthquake resistance. The COE found irregularities in the structure, especially from the first floor to the building's midsection. These included design features that were not in line with the 2007 regulation. That regulation was further revised in 2021 to increase resilience against seismic events. The COE representative said, "Normally, we will see first if a building is normal or irregular. There are at least 16 points to check for irregularities in building designs and constructions. And based on our calculations, we have found some of those from the first floor to the middle of the height of the building. So, at this point, we said it's not in line with the regulation." However, the COE has not formally concluded whether these irregularities were illegal or contributed directly to the collapse, adding that they need to look into more detail. Illegal design. The State Audit Office, SAO, responded to rising public concern by releasing a formal clarification on April 24th. The statement emphasized that all design changes, including those to the elevator shaft wall thickness, were legal, approved, and documented. They explained that the wall modification, reducing thickness from 0.3 meters to 0.25 meters, was made after a conflict was discovered between the structural and interior designs. The change was approved by the design team, supervision team, and reviewed by a licensed senior engineer. The cost-saving proposal was also approved by the State Audit Commission under Thailand's Public Procurement and Supplies Administration Act of 2017. All actions were taken transparently, the SAO insisted, in strict compliance with relevant regulations to ensure structural safety, legal adherence, and financial accountability. So how does one reconcile these contradictory statements? The COE says the building design did not comply with the 2007 Building Code. The SAO says every design decision was approved by all relevant authorities. And the Prime Minister says the collapse was not due to material failure, but improper use. Yet the material in question, steel bars from Shin Kuen, failed national standards twice, was found in 2 collapsed buildings and was produced using outdated furnace technology, banned in China itself. But this leads to the final, most troubling question. If the evidence for material failure is so strong, and the physics of the collapse supports it, why was the official verdict so different? To answer that, we must leave the world of engineering and enter the far more complex world of politics. Let's be clear about who was involved. The steel supplier, Xinke Yuan Steel, is 80% Chinese-owned and was operating despite its Rayong factory being shut down by Thai authorities in December 2024 for producing this exact type of non-compliant steel. The main contractor responsible for building the State Audit Office Tower was China Railway No. 10 Engineering Group, a subsidiary of China Railway Construction Corporation, CRCC, a powerful Chinese state-owned enterprise. But as the SAO building project progressed, signs of rushed timelines, cost-cutting, and growing concerns started to surface. According to statements from Mana Mimit Mongkol, chairman of Thailand's anti-corruption organization, the Audit Office project had been under scrutiny as early as January 2025, due to severe delays, labor shortages, and suspected use of substandard materials. He revealed that his organization visited the site multiple times and found that the number of on-site workers was far below the required amount. Construction progress was slower than expected, but paradoxically, signs of rushed finishing work began to appear. As deadlines loomed, it's likely that contractors attempted to accelerate progress by cutting corners, removing temporary supports too early, undercuring concrete, or rushing grouting and pre-stressing procedures. All of these are high-risk shortcuts in high-rise construction, especially in buildings relying on beamless slab systems, where structural tolerance is narrow. There may have been a rush to finish, which led to neglecting construction quality, Mana stated. This collapse happened at a time when Thailand's economic and political alignment with Beijing has become more critical than ever. It happened within an economic ecosystem that is now fundamentally dependent on Beijing. This isn't a minor partnership. It's a $107 billion economic lifeline. That was the value of Sino-Thai trade in 2022 alone, accounting for nearly a fifth of all of Thailand's foreign trade. In 2020, China did the unthinkable. It dethroned Japan as the single largest source of foreign investment in Thailand, a position Japan had held for 5 decades. Chinese investment is pouring into Thailand's most critical future industries. From multi-billion baht deals with EV giants like BYD, to strategic ventures in agriculture aimed at bolstering China's own food security. Even Thailand's tourism sector, a pillar of its economy, expected Chinese visitors to contribute over $13 billion in 2023 alone. But this reliance created a critical vulnerability. By the first half of 2025, the government was already grappling with a 34% plunge in Chinese tourist arrivals, forcing officials to slash their annual projections and raising alarms about the country's economic recovery. Any diplomatic incident that could worsen this decline would have immediate and severe consequences. This partnership extends from the boardroom to the battlefield. Between 2002 and 2022, Thailand had the 4th highest number of military interactions with the People's Liberation Army of any country. Regular joint exercises and the purchase of Chinese tanks, drones, and naval hardware signal a deep strategic alignment, a significant pivot for a traditional US ally. And in return for this economic and military partnership, there appears to be a political price. In 2015, despite a global outcry from the United Nations and human rights organizations, Thailand's military junta forcibly deported over 100 Uyghur refugees, men, women, and children who had fled persecution, directly into the hands of PRC authorities. It was a shocking move for a country once seen as a safe haven. That same year, Chinese dissidents Zhang Yifei and Dong Guangping, who had been granted refugee status by the UN and were awaiting resettlement to Canada, were arrested in Thailand and sent back to China, where they faced imprisonment. In 2016, renowned Hong Kong democracy activist Joshua Wong landed at a Bangkok airport, invited to speak to Thai students. He was immediately detained and deported, an action widely understood to have been carried out at the direct request of the Chinese government. In February 2025, just 1 month before the collapse, the Thai government made a deeply controversial decision: the deportation of a group of Uyghur refugees back to China. The move triggered sharp condemnation from human rights organizations and international observers.
The UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk says the deportation of 40 ethnic Uyghurs to China is a clear violation of international human rights laws and standards.
While Thai officials have consistently denied caving to Chinese pressure, insisting they're simply enforcing immigration law, the pattern is undeniable. This is the context in which the government faced a high-stakes choice. Faced with the collapse of a state building constructed by a Chinese SOE, using steel from a Chinese-dominated supply, with a record of failure, they had two options. Option A: confront the evidence. Name the defective materials and pursue full accountability against the foreign entities responsible. This would mean publicly indicting a major Chinese state contractor, triggering a diplomatic firestorm, and jeopardizing the billions in investment vital to their economic agenda. Option B: localize the blame. Frame the collapse as the result of domestic design and regulatory failure. This contains the crisis within national borders, shields powerful foreign state-owned farms from direct culpability, and preserves the crucial flow of Chinese investment and political goodwill. The government chose option B. On June 30th, the Prime Minister announced that the materials were not the primary fault. The blame fell on design flaws and poor construction methods. The substandard steel, which her own industry minister had twice confirmed failed safety tests, was barely mentioned. The official narrative, while not dismissing the tragedy, effectively diffused its explosive international dimension. For the families of the 96 victims, the tragedy was not theoretical, it was final. Their loved ones were buried under floors of collapsed concrete and crushed steel. Steel that failed, visibly and verifiably. In return, they were offered 50,000 baht per life, barely $1,400 USD, and a narrative that deflected from the root cause. The collapse of the ASO building was a collapse of standards, a collapse of enforcement, and ultimately, a collapse of truth. The engineering tells us how it fell, the material evidence shows us why, and the geopolitical context explains how the truth was managed, strategically, selectively, and perhaps inevitably. It is not about blaming a government for seeking investment. It is about demanding accountability when that investment comes at the cost of lives. If Thailand is to build with integrity, it must also investigate with integrity. Because in the end, no economic corridor, no infrastructure project, and no diplomatic balancing act is worth the silent erasure of the facts, or the memory of those buried beneath them.